Josh Hawley unleashed a scathing cross-examination on Mr. Erik Haas, a senior executive representing Johnson & Johnson. The issue at hand was a controversial corporate restructuring tactic known as a Texas two-step, a legal maneuver allegedly designed to shield billions in corporate profits from tens of thousands of cancer victims who claimed the company's iconic baby powder was contaminated with asbestos. What we are witnessing here is a massive clash of narratives. On one side, you have a populist lawmaker weaponizing a massive jury verdict to paint a picture of corporate greed and evasion. On the other side, you have a corporate executive relying heavily on highly technical, defensive jargon to recast a bankruptcy maneuver as a beneficial settlement tool. It's a masterclass in political optics versus corporate damage control. Senator Hawley opened the questioning by bringing up a landmark case litigated in his home state of Missouri, the Ingham case. In that trial, 22 plaintiffs alleged that Johnson & Johnson's baby powder caused them to develop ovarian cancer. Hawley immediately cornered the executive on whether the FDA had found traces of asbestos in their product. Mr. Haas pushed back, offering what Hawley quickly dismissed as a word salad. Mr. Haas argued that while an outsourced lab initially flagged a trace amount in one batch, 150 subsequent studies found nothing. Hawley cut through the explanation, forcing Haas to face the bottom line. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals explicitly noted the FDA's findings in their legal opinion. Senator Hawley moves aggressively here to establish the stakes. By getting the multi-billion-dollar verdict of the Ingham case onto the record, he sets a baseline of massive liability. When Mr. Haas tries to litigate the science of the asbestos findings, Hawley shuts it down because he wants to focus strictly on the money and the corporate response. The numbers, as Senator Hawley pointed out, were staggering. The initial jury verdict in the Ingham case was a massive $4.6 billion, which was later reduced on appeal to $2.24 billion. Hawley noted that this multi-billion-dollar payout was for just 22 plaintiffs. He then pressed Mr. Haas on the terrifying math the company faced moving forward, tens of thousands of additional pending cases. After the Ingham case, your company panics, Hawley charged. He accused Johnson & Johnson of creating a shell company for the sole purpose of dumping all the talc liabilities into it and declaring bankruptcy, leaving the remaining tens of thousands of plaintiffs to fight over scraps. Mr. Haas strictly disagreed, claiming the restructuring had the backing of the majority of the claimant's own legal counsel. He argued that because most plaintiffs walk away from traditional trials with zero recovery, a consolidated bankruptcy settlement offered them more recourse, not less. I have no idea what you're saying, Hawley fired back, calling the notion that cancer victims wanted to be denied their day in court completely outrageous. This is the core of the Texas two-step controversy. Legally, the maneuver splits a company into two. One keeps the valuable assets and profits, while the other takes the lawsuits and files for bankruptcy. Mr. Haas is making the corporate argument that bankruptcy court is a faster, fairer way to distribute money to everyone. But Hawley successfully frames it as a cynical legal trick to deny everyday Americans their constitutional right to a jury trial. To expose the sheer complexity of the maneuver, Senator Hawley read directly from the Third Circuit's opinion, methodically listing the dizzying corporate shell game J&J executed. Old Consumer merged into Chenango Zero LLC, which executed a divisional merger creating Chenango 1 and Chenango 2. Chenango 1 then converted into a North Carolina company renamed LTL Management, while Chenango 2 merged back into the parent company to protect the main consumer brand. Are you here to tell us that you think this is a great way to proceed? Hawley asked. When Mr. Haas doubled down, claiming the transaction actually created more recourse for victims, Hawley shifted his target to Johnson & Johnson's broader corporate history. He pressed Haas on the billions the company made from taxpayer subsidies for the COVID-19 vaccine, and then grilled him on the billions made from selling opioids over the years. When Haas claimed he didn't have the opioid profit numbers on hand, Hawley reminded the room of J&J's multi-billion-dollar settlements for lying to doctors and patients about the addictive nature of those very drugs. I brought one of those suits, Hawley stated, referencing his past tenure as the Attorney General of Missouri. And it's the proudest thing I ever did. By expanding the scope to include the opioid crisis and vaccine subsidies, Hawley completely shifts the debate from a technical disagreement over bankruptcy code to a moral referendum on Johnson & Johnson's entire corporate character. He is effectively telling the public that this is a company with a pattern of harming consumers and using sophisticated legal strategies to escape the consequences. In his closing remarks, Senator Hawley delivered a fierce defense of the American civil justice system. He argued that massive jury verdicts are the only hammer that giant corporations actually fear. He called on his congressional colleagues to close the loopholes in the bankruptcy code so that highly profitable parent companies can no longer shield themselves from liability. If you want to know why the American people don't trust huge corporations, it's because of companies like yours, Hawley concluded, leaving the J&J executive without a final rebuttal. Ultimately, this hearing captures a growing bipartisan frustration in Washington with corporate legal strategies. While Mr. Haas defended the restructuring as a pragmatic legal solution, Senator Hawley's aggressive framing tapped into a deeper public anger.
The verdict was in the Ingham case where the jury found what they awarded?
As the chair properly stated, it was initially $4.6 billion for a consolidated trial of 22 plaintiffs that was reduced thereafter to $2.2 billion.
$2.24 billion finally on appeal. That's a lot of money. That's one case, 22 plaintiffs, 20 at the end of the day because of the appeal. You were facing how many additional cases after that?
We have thousands of cases.
Thousands, tens of thousands, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So one set of plaintiffs gets $2+ billion. You have the potential for, by that math, tens of billions more, right? Who knows?
No,
what?
not necessarily, because recall, most claimants lose and receive zero.
So what you do is, after the Ingham case, your company panics, and what you do is you then decide, oh my gosh, we can't possibly do this. We don't want to pay these plaintiffs this kind of money. So you then create a separate company for the sole purpose of declaring bankruptcy and making sure that the tens of thousands of other plaintiffs get scraps.
The proposal that we had would never succeed and would not have succeeded but for the support of the claimants that had made the proposed resolution. We went to
I have no idea what you're saying. I thought it was plaintiffs who sued you that went all the way to the Third Circuit where they said you couldn't do what you're trying to do. You're saying that you're saying the plaintiffs wanted this? They liked the Texas two-step? The plaintiffs want to be denied their day in court and denied recovery?
The majority of claimants, counsel representing the majority of claimants, yes, do want this resolution because most claimants receives nothing.
Let's talk about what you did. That was an aberrant one-off. Let's talk about what you did. First of all, I think it's outrageous, the idea that plaintiffs want to be denied their day in court. That's why they took you to court. That's why the Third Circuit ruled against you. Let's talk about what you did. Here is, according to the Third Circuit, an abbreviated version of how you tried to avoid actually paying out liability. Old Consumer, which was one of your subsidiaries, merged into Chenango Zero LLC, a Texas limited liability company, wholly owned subsidiary of J&J, with Chenango Zero surviving the merger. Chenango Zero then effected a divisional merger under the Texas Business Code by which two new Texas limited liabilities were created, Chenango 1 and Chenango 2, and Chenango Zero ceased to exist. Then Chenango 1 converted into a North Carolina limited liability company and changed its name to LTL. Chenango 2 then merged into Curahee Holding Company, the direct parent company of LTL. Curahee survived the merger and then changed its name to Johnson & Johnson Consumer Incorporated. Are you here to tell us that you think that this is a great way to proceed and is fair to the consumers who had asbestos in their baby powder?
Indeed, the claimants after that transaction had access to more recourse than they did before, which is exactly
more recourse.
Which is exactly
you created, in the words of the Third Circuit, you created a company with the sole purpose of sending it into bankruptcy, so you could limit your liability. Here's what I don't understand. Johnson & Johnson is a hugely profitable company, isn't it?
This is where we're talking about a subsidiary.
Oh, I know, but you own them all. You own them all. So aren't you hugely profitable? I mean, how much money did you make on the COVID vaccine, for example?
Nothing, actually. We made nothing.
You got billions of dollars in subsidies from the federal government. Taxpayers have paid you billions. How much did you make on opioids? All those opioids you prescribed? How much did you make on that over the years?
I do not have that information.
Really? I thought it was curious when you said that your company credo was to always put the public first.
It is.
Was that what you were doing when you were lying to doctors and patients about the addictive nature of opioids? Is that why your company agreed to billions of dollars in settlements with states and other localities because of what you did to further the opioid crisis?
We prevailed in the only 2 cases that were tried.
You settled for billions of dollars, and I brought one of those suits, and it's the proudest thing I ever did as Attorney General of the state of Missouri. Your company has made billions of dollars on American consumers, multiple times lying to them. And the idea that you now are looking actively for ways to limit the liability for further torts you have committed against the American people, I think is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. And if you want to know why the American people don't trust huge corporations, it's because of companies like yours. And I would just say to my colleagues, if you want to know why private rights of action are so darn important and why we need to use them against the big tech companies, this is the reason why. One jury verdict got $4.6 billion. That's a hammer. Companies fear it. They fear it. It's why they're trying to distort the bankruptcy code to avoid it. We need to give more Americans the ability to get that recourse in court. And we need to change the bankruptcy code to make sure that companies like J&J can't avoid it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley.